What is up? Welcome to the channel. If this is your first episode, why don't you go ahead and click back on the playlist and watch episode 1 and 2. If you have been following this build, I just found some great news on this Mazda. I got it up on the lift. We're gonna get this transmission mount done today. And the slip yoke for a 4L80 fits NV3500. So with that information, I'm pretty sure I can go to the pick and pull yard, and as long as I find the same bolt pattern as the flange rear end, but getting into this transmission mount, we're gonna go off the factory locations and bring them back to this mount. And to start on that, you already know we're gonna use our CAD program. So a while back, I picked up some of the C channel, and it's gonna work perfect on this build. But I went ahead and cut it as wide as I needed it for the car, and then I drilled the hole, put the nut on, and now I am working on the support for this. I cut 4 pieces of cardboard and made this template, and I slid the pipe in it, and I marked it so I know how and where to cut it. So now that the transmission mount is wrapped up and mostly painted up, we're just gonna call it good enough. This little bit of metal that we used on the transmission mount cost us maybe $5 and could be picked up out of the scrap. So moving on to the drive shaft, I have previous parts like this slip yoke that are gonna work perfect for this build that I didn't even know were gonna work for it. So this is a 4L80E slip yoke, and I have it for my budget Grand Prix. Now, I went to the junkyard and I pulled a whole entire drive shaft for $25 because I needed a slip yoke for a transmission plug for the run stand. Now, I ended up having to put that slip yoke into my car because this one is shorter and the splines are recessed in it. But this one fits this transmission absolutely perfectly. And then I still had the tube laying around, so we're gonna use this aluminum tube to make the drive shaft for that car. I ended up ordering a flange yoke for a Mazda. I couldn't find one in the junkyard, and I got it for $30 off eBay. And you can get one with a U-joint already for $35. I just wasn't sure on the U-joint I needed. But since this is a 4L80 drive shaft, I believe it to be a 1350 U-joint, which happens to be the same as the flange that I bought. So it might all work out perfectly. If not, you're going to see it, and we're going to struggle our ass off. But I want to start on this today while I'm waiting on the plug. So what I'm going to do to make this shaft shorter is I'm going to go ahead and cut this weld right here. And I'm not going to completely slice all the way through it. I just want to cut just the weld so I can get this end plug out. And then we can trim our tube down to the length that we need it. And then we can put our plug back in and weld it up. But there's a little trick to balance these drive shafts that I found online. So if you put a golf ball in the drive shaft, it's 1 ounce. And they weld a 1 ounce weight onto your drive shaft when they balance it professionally. So just toss a golf ball in there and weld it up. I just want to say before I start this, I have only ever done this on a steel drive shaft. And I have no idea how to weld aluminum, so... All right, that was an absolute pain in the butt, but I got the drive shaft tube off the rest of the plug. I had to cut the plug till it would break into half to come out of here, so there was not really a good way to get it out. For that, I would recommend a steel one because you just cut the weld and hit it with a hammer, out it comes. So now that we have our drive shaft ring, we can take it and put it on our drive shaft plug and trace the inside of the ring, and then we can shave the plug down to where it will slide right inside of it. I'm not sure if I already filmed this, but since the end plug is already marked, we are waiting on the flange yoke to come in the mail. It will be here tomorrow. And in the meantime, I figured that's a good time to start working on the interior of this car. It's gonna end up being a lot of sheet metal because of what the car's intended purpose is and the tight budget that we're on. Now, I was going to get a whole entire parts car and sell parts off of it so I could get parts like the hood, the bumpers, the interior, stuff like that. But the one that I have been waiting on will not come on auction. It is absolutely everything that I am looking for other than it's a convertible and this one's a coupe. That's not what's going to happen right now. Until that thing goes on sale, I don't have another parts car to rob all these parts out of. But I'm not missing any drift events anymore because we are really close to getting this thing together. And it really turned into how cheap can I make a fully drift car with a title that's street legal. So we got all the headlights that we got to wire in. We got to do the dash. I'm going to have to get a roll cage of some sort. And I figured, well, let's start on the back half of the dash. I'm not after one big giant piece to put in there. It's going to be a couple different pieces with some rib nuts and screw it together. Right now, I'm working on cleaning out the rest of the stuff in the car, and then we will start with our CAD program or cardboard art design, and we'll start laying pieces in there, and we're going to try to get it to land where the factory dash screwed in minimum, but that probably won't happen either because, well, nothing in life is perfect. And looking at the way these guys prepared it for the body work and paint that they did, they were not real nice to it. They just broke everything out of the interior, like broken wires and all kinds of other stuff. So we're just gonna go and make this our own whole entire craftiness. I'm currently sitting in here all uncomfortable like, trying to think of a way to put a roll cage in here, and a lot of these cars did not have back seats, but I kind of want a back seat because there's 2 holes for 2 butts. Nah, that would be cool. Well, after sitting in this car for the last couple hours now, I have gotten over my want of a back seat because I cannot make the cage work around it because of the bracing that's going to be needed to be done in the main hoop of the cage. But I did come up with a design for the dash. So let me flip you around. You're going to have to use your imagination a little bit, but this is the first rough-in. Don't pay no mind to this hole. That's just the cardboard that I had. But I'm thinking about putting a radio in. If I don't, that'll be blank. And then I need this hole down here for the shifter. So you can kind of see a hole back here. That is for the transmission shifter. And then I'll cut this out for a rod, and I will put a dummy shifter back here. And that should get us around our transmission not being long enough to fall into the factory hole. Now, being that dash took me way longer than it should have out of cardboard, I should be able to untape it, set it down on metal, trace it out, and it shouldn't take near as long. But I decided that I would like to hide 99% of the fasteners, if not all of them. So that's going to be a challenge in its own. And now we're just waiting on the drive shaft yoke so we can get the bottom side buttoned up, and then we're ready to tear this car back apart. Well, I got my head in the trans tunnel, and I'm looking at the rear differential because we got a surprise in the mail today. Let me flip you guys around and explain what's going on. So our flange finally showed up and it don't fit. All we're gonna do to get around this problem now is just turn this and drill new holes. I'm not sure how easy this is gonna be. It's probably gonna absolutely suck, but it is what it is. The only other option I got is to order another one of these or go to the junkyard, and there was a Dodge Dakota that mostly fit the pattern, but I'd have to oblong the holes. If you have access to air tools, I would recommend using them. I wish I would have done this to start with, but I just pulled the flange out of the rear end, and now I can mark my centers and measure it out. But I should have just did this and took it with me to the junkyard, found one that fit it. But instead of spending more money on this project and trying to return this, we're just gonna make do with what we got. So now would be the time to say, if you are a person that is worried about the absolute finest of details, this is not probably the channel for you, because I measured it out within a 16th, called it a day, went back, measured from the edge to the center of the holes, and they are all within a 16th. So I am going to punch them and I will drill them, and we'll put that back in the car. This should bolt up no problem. I had to run over to my father's shop to use the drill press to drill these, and I had him take a look at my holes to see if they would be close, and they were close enough. I had to grind one bolt head down just a hair, but this lip holds the bolt so it won't spin. So I'm gonna go ahead and just slide this into the car, and then we can measure for our drive shaft finally. But like I was saying, all that is a 4L80 slip yoke. And this one is now a 1350 U-joint, which is the same as the 4-inch aluminum drive shafts out of the full-size trucks. This one's out of a van. But I should be able to go to the parts store now and get a U-joint for the back of this thing. But I might get 2 new ones and be done with it. A good way to measure these, and the Driveshaft shop had me do it one time, was go center of U joint to center of U joint. Now, I can't do that good holding the camera, but we will just pull it here roughly. We got 31 over there, and I'm gonna have to add easily a 1/2 inch to both sides. So probably about 32 inches. I'm gonna go ahead and get the exact measurement, and then I'm going to trim the tube down so it's a little more manageable. All right, so I forget that I have some of this camera gear sometimes, so I'm gonna go ahead and start using it, or hopefully I remember to. But we got our tube chopped down, and from here we're going to take a file like this, and we're just going to clean our edges out. Get all the burrs out. You can use a knife blade, you can use whatever you want. But once I get all the burrs off this, I'm gonna go ahead and grind that down to where that black mark is. And I'm gonna take it all the way past this weld, hopefully. And then this will slip right back in here. We can weld it up, and then we got a drive shaft. So we got our plug pretty much cleaned up for the most part. There's a lip on it now. So I'm gonna go through, touch it with a grinder, finish cleaning off a couple rough edges like right here, and then we will see if it slides into our tube yet. All right, so I got it cleaned up. I got the ring that I cut off a long time ago that we used to mark this, and it just barely don't fit. Now, I could probably hammer it in, but by the time we get the drive shaft and all that stuff, the big tube, I don't want to be hammering on it. So I'm going to take just a little bit more off. Headed over to Jack's shop with some Dawn dish soap and the rest of the drive shaft that I cut off. And we are going to play around with his aluminum welder and learn how to weld this together. After a whole bunch of tack welds and practice and finding out how much that I suck, I went ahead and had Jack tack that baby together, because, well, they're not perfect, but they're a hell of a lot better than mine were. And we decided after this one got done that we just go ahead and try it. And one of the most important parts is to set both plugs to 0 degrees, or as close as you can get it. The rest of this at 0 degrees. This angle finder is like $3 at Harbor Freight. So what I did was measure end to end and squared it, both sides, tacked it, and then measured plug to plug, squared it, tacked it, and now we're going to clean these with a brush, and we will probably end up stitch welding this, or do like an inch at a time, because we are not the best. But we're gonna make this happen so we don't have to rely on somebody else. So like I was saying, Jack is not a professional. Jack, get better. Just
my
kidding.
second time ever aluminum welding.
Hey, that's not bad. Give a guy a break. I want to mention that we weld halfway to it, and then we completely 180, so we don't completely pull it one way or the other while we're welding. Alright, so there's a couple high spots that we ground down, but that is a M plug welded on. Now, if you don't want to go through all of this hassle like me and Jack, you're really zoomed in on right now, but really far away. Alright, so if you don't want to go through all this headache like we went through, just get a steel one of these, and it'll save you a lot of headache.
Or go to your local drive shaft shop and have them build you one.
But that's like $500.